8th week and 8th book of these readings, these laureate readings, and I have no more books after this, so I'll have to write another one to continue this series. So there might be a break of a few years. This is going to read from the first chapter of 1,000 Moons, which was only published in March by Faber and Faber, who made the most beautiful book, as you can see, for the narrator, who is Winona, or in former times, Odejinka. She is a very young Lakota Sioux person, maybe 16 or 17, and she has been more or less taken off the battlefield by Thomas McNulty and John Cole, and initially brought on with them as a servant, but she very quickly becomes their daughter, and very beloved daughter. She is mentioned in Days Without End, which is the previous book. She figures in it, but this is, I felt a necessity really to try and find her voice and her view of the world and see if there were things she wanted to say, as I sat very still in my workroom, hoping she might. And I think her voice is very different to Thomas, for instance. It's quite a quiet voice. But here I am reading from chapter 1 of 1,000 Moons. I am Winona. In early times, I was Odejinka, which means rose. Thomas McNulty tried very hard to say this name, but he failed, and so he gave me my dead cousin's name because it was easier in his mouth. Winona means firstborn. I was not firstborn. My mother, my elder sister, my cousins, my aunts, all were killed. They were souls of the Lakota that used to live on those old plains. I wasn't too young to remember. Maybe I was 6 or 7, but all the same, I didn't remember. I knew it happened because afterwards the soldiers brought me into the fort and I was an orphan. A little girl can suffer many a sea change. By the time I got back to my people, I couldn't converse with them. I remember sitting in the teepee with the other women and not being able to answer them. By that time, I was all of 13 or so. After a few days, I found the words again. The women rushed forward and embraced me, as though I had only just arrived to them that very moment. Only when I spoke our language could they really see me. Then Thomas McNulty came to get me again and took me back to Tennessee. Even when you come out of bloodshed and disaster, in the end you've got to learn to live. You have to look about you, see how things are, grow things or buy things as the case may be. The little town nearby us in Tennessee was called Paris. Lige Megan's farm was about 7 miles out. It was quite a few years after the war, but the town was still full of rough Union soldiers kicking their heels, and the defeated butternut boys were a sort of secret presence, though they were not in their uniforms. Vagabonds on every little byway and state militia watchful for those vagabonds. It was a town of many eyes watching you anyhow, an uneasy place. To present yourself in a dry goods store to buy items, you have got to have best English or something else happens. At the fort, Mrs. Neal had given me my first English words. In later times, John Cole got me 2 books of grammar. I looked at them long and good. It is bad enough being an Indian without talking like a raven. The white folks in Paris were not all good speakers themselves. Some were from other places, Germans, Swedes, some were Irish like Thomas McNulty and only got to English when they got to America. But myself, being a young Indian woman, I guess I had to talk like an empress. Of course, I could have offered my list of items that Rosalie Bougereau, who worked on Lige's farm, had written out, but it was better to speak. Else what was happening was I was going to be beaten up every time I was in town. It was English kept me from that. Some straggly farmhand might look at you and see the dark skin and the black hair and think that gave him a right to knock you down and kick you. No one saying boo to him for that. No sheriff or deputy neither. It wasn't a crime to beat an Indian, not at all. John Cole, even though he had been out as a soldier and was a good farmer, got bad treatment in town because his grandmother, or the woman before his grandmother, was an Indian person, so that was writ in his face a little. Even English couldn't protect him. Because he was a big grown man, maybe he couldn't hope for mercy just all the time. He had a lovely face, as people attested in his special, Thomas McNulty, but I guess the townsmen could sometimes see the Indian in it. They beat him so bad, and then he was just a plank of suffering in the bed, and Thomas McNulty swearing he would go in and kill someone. But Thomas McNulty's shortcoming was he was poor. We were all poor. Lige Megan was poor enough, and he owned the farm, and we were poor underneath Lige. Poor worse than Lige. When a poor person does anything, he has to do it quietly. When a poor person kills, for instance, he has got to do it very quietly and run as fast as those little deer that float out of the woods. Also, Thomas had been in Leavenworth prison for desertion, so the uniforms about the town made him jumpy, even though he always said he loved the army. I myself was lower than Rosalie Bougereau. She was a black-skinned saint of a woman, let me tell you. She used to go out and shoot rabbits with her brother's rifle along the backwoods of Lige's farm there. In the famous battle with Tatch Petrie, famous to us anyhow, when he and his accomplices had tried to rob us, advancing on our homestead with implacable intent, she distinguished herself by reloading the rifles faster than ever was. So said John Cole. But she was a slave before the war, and a slave is low down in the eyes of white folks, of course. So I was lower than that. I was just the cinders of an Indian fire in the eyes of the town. Indians in bulk were long gone from Henry County, Cherokee, Chickasaw. Folks didn't like to see an ember drifting back. In the eyes of the great mystery, we were all souls alike, trying to make our souls skinny enough to squeeze into paradise. That's what my mother said. Everything I remember of my mother is like the little pouch of things that a child carries to hold what is precious to her. When such a love is touched by death, then something deeper even than death grows in your heart. My mother fussed over us, myself and my sister. She was interested in how fast we could run and how high we could jump, and she never tired of telling us how pretty we were. We were just little girls out there on the plains under the starlight. Thomas McNulty sometimes liked to tell me I was as pretty as the things he thought were pretty, roses, robins, and the like. It was mother's talk he was doing, since I had no mother then. It was strange that in the old wars he had killed many of my people when he was a soldier. He might have killed even some of my own family. He didn't know. I was too young to remember, I would say to him. Of course I hadn't been, but it came to the same thing. It used to make me feel very strange listening to him talk about that. I would start to burn from the center of my body. I had my own little pearl-handled gun that the poet McSweeney gave me in Grand Rapids. I could have shot Thomas with that. Sometimes I thought I should shoot someone. Of course, I did shoot one of Tatch Petrie's men, not actually during the famous battle, but another time when they accosted us on the road, right through the chest. And he shot me, but it was only a bruise, not a wound. I had the wound of being a lost child. Thing was, it was they that healed me, Thomas McNulty and John Cole. They had done their damnedness, I guess. So they both gave me the wound and healed it, which is a hard fact in its way. I guess I had no choice in the matter. Once your mother is taken from you, you can't ever catch up with her again. You can't cry out, "Wait for me," when the winds turn cold under a wolf moon and she has walked far ahead of you across the grasses searching for wood. So Thomas McNulty rescued me twice. The second time, as Thomas ventured back through the battlefield with me in tow, dressed, as it happened, as a drummer boy, Starling Carlton wanted to kill me right there. We bumped into him. He was waving his sword and shouting. He said all the Indians had to be killed. It was the major's orders, and he was going to do just that, so Thomas McNulty had to kill him instead. Thomas was very sad about that. They had been soldiers together a long time. I remembered all that clearly enough. Oftentimes, as a girl, I would cry for no reason. I would drift away and find a secluded spot. There I would let the tears loose, and it might be so dark behind my eyes. It was as if I had fallen blind. John Cole would come look for me, and he had the sense to put an arm about me and not to ask me to say anything I had no words for, English or Lakota. John Cole. A lot of his love for me was expressed in practical things. He got me the books with grammar, as I said, and set to teaching me, even though he hadn't too much learning himself. Not just letters, but numbers too, he taught me. When Lige Megan thought I was ready, he went and asked about employment with his friend the lawyer Briscoe. All that sort of work I did a good while, writing and reckoning numbers. I was so proud to do it. The lawyer Briscoe had a fine house and a garden with flowers that didn't belong to Tennessee, roses from England mostly. He wrote a book about his roses that was printed in Memphis. It took pride of place in his office. Odejinka means rose, as I said. I don't know what sort of rose, maybe a lost prairie rose. Not a true rose like one of the lawyer Briscoes, a rose to my people. The lawyer Briscoe pressed on me cherished books. I carried them home and read them in the parlour by the stove, the breeze from the meadow touching the pages. Those pleasant evenings when there was nothing to do, only listen to Rosalie's beloved brother Tennyson Bougereau singing those old songs he knew, my self-sunken thoughts, those thoughts that books bring to mind. Of course, that was all before Jas Johnsky, a boy that never read a book, come to think of it, could barely write a letter. 1870s, it all must have been after the war, and after Thomas got home from prison. It might even have been the year that General Custer was killed, or just before. But all the years went by fleet of foot, like ponies running across the endless grasses.